BMW's M division has been through all sorts of change over the last decade, introducing things like off-road vehicles, comfy automatic transmissions, and even all-wheel drive systems that help a car grip. In fact, on this very press launch, they're introducing a new plug-in hybrid SUV. But don't worry, I'm not going to drive that. I'm driving this. It's the new BMW M2. It's a car that goes back to the core fundamentals of M division. A rear-drive sports coupe, 3-litre straight six under the bonnet, and the choice of auto, or in the case of our car, I'm delighted to say, a manual gearbox. It's the closest thing these days to an E30 M3, but the formula remains the same as the 1 Series M from 2011 and the first generation M2 that replaced it. So basically a load of M3 and M4 hardware in a smaller, more affordable package. Not that it's going to be particularly affordable when it arrives in the UK, £65,885, so that's £15,000 more than its predecessor. £17,000 less expensive than the M4 though, and £17,000 more than the M240 that it's based on. So let's have a look what you get for your money. Well, in simple terms, you get more car. You get 11 centimetres more car, to be precise, 5 centimetres more in the wheelbase. So it's going to be roomier inside. It's also going to affect the way this car rides and handles. So we'll dig into that in a minute. It's also, unfortunately, why this car weighs about 1,700 kilos, depending on specs. I say depending on spec. This car has got the metal roof with the sunroof. In the UK, we're going to get the carbon roof as standard, but really like for like, it's a very, very similar weight to the M4. It's a little bit disappointing. Now to compensate, you do get a good bump in performance. It's up 49 brake horsepower on its predecessor to 454 brake horsepower, so 49 off the latest M4. But when you factor in that power to weight ratio, it's only a 6 brake horsepower increase. So we'll see how that feels on the road. Brakes are 6 pistons up front for a useful step up from the 4-piston calipers used before. Suspension hardware is borrowed from the M3 and M4, plus this time you get adaptive dampers and exactly the same size rubber as the M3 as well. That means 275 section 19s at the front and 285 section 20-inch wheels at the rear. It's also a much more configurable car than before, even offering 2 types of brake pedal feel. Plus you get the same 10-stage traction control and drift analyzer as fitted to the M3 and M4. We're out here in Arizona, got some beautiful sunshine, so let's go and explore these roads and see how this new M2 feels. So the first thing you notice jumping in this car is it does have a more kind of sophisticated big car feel to it. Even though it's not that much wider, very, very slightly wider, the feeling inside is that I've got a lot more elbow room, space to spread out. I have jumped in the back out of a sense of thoroughness, and I sort of have to crouch over like a goblin to get in there. So for full-size adults, I'm 6'1", well, not particularly pleasant to sit behind myself. It never is, even for my kids. But people like, kids, smaller adults, they're going to be fine in this. Pedals are really nicely aligned, which is important because we got the manual in this car. And the seating position, nice and low down. It could be a little lower still, but really comfortable seats. Nice bolsters on them as well. So when we're chucking it around through these corners, you've got nice support. Here, the brakes are doing really well. I jumped out before and they were stinking quite a lot. So you don't get the option of the carbon ceramics here, but they're doing a good job for my purposes on the road. The engine is really smooth and cultured in this car. I really like it. You've got all that pull from down low. I think some people might expect it to be more extrovert. I like it. I like an exhaust that's maybe a bit underplayed so you don't draw attention to yourself too much. And just remember that BMW does do a performance parts system with this kind of triple bazooka setup, which is a bit bonkers, but I'm sure that will be much more extrovert. So that's all the basic stuff. So let's have a look on this really nice twisty road through the desert and see how this car feels. Now already it feels really urgent actually. I love having the manual gearbox. Got used to the shifts now. Rolls in really nicely there. You can feel the weight loading over the outside tyre. I chucked it in there and it really soaked everything up. So you've got a very, very strong front end, very good composure. And then a rear end that while, I mean, I was really into it there quite early, just soaked everything up. You know, the steering is not particularly tactile, but it is very precise, and you can feel how keenly this car just gets into the corner. And I think even though it's the same weight pretty much as an M4, it does have that extra energy, partly through its change of direction versus the M4. And I really like that. Roll into this corner here. A lot of front end bite on this car, a lot of confidence to just carry speed. A little bit of roll in sport mode, but what you would want really to sort of convey what's going on. Just starting to oversteer a little bit, but it has got, in these conditions, in this scorching hot sun, has got a lot of purchase. I think with the engine on a freeway, it can feel, when you just gun it in a straight line, I think you are aware of that mass sort of holding it back. On a twisty road like this, you've got more than enough. You've always got the torque, and yet you're not short shifting because of the torque, because it wants to rev. And I think they've really mastered that since they introduced the first turbocharged M3, which was nowhere near what an M car should be. This has that best of both worlds really, with the flexibility low down and the stretch to right up to high revs, so 5, 6, 7, yeah, works really well. These gear shifts as well, I think, you know, the clutch has a kind of mid-weighted, not very, very heavy, but it's got a mid-weighted heft and quite a high biting point, and you can make a mess of that at first. I certainly did. You get used to finessing that last little bit of travel, and you know, that's all part of the art of mastering the manual transmission. Again, like the steering, the gear shifts are very direct. It's not the most tactile gearbox on the market, like a Civic Type R or a Porsche 911, but it's quite a short throw, and I like the physicality of the action. You've got to really grab it by the scruff of the neck and punch it into gear, which, for all the kind of clinical superiority of a DCT or the auto as it is in this car, there's something about that just adds to the interaction, and it is how I would spec my car, I think. One of the important things to remember with this car is it is a bit of a last of the line. You know, it harks back to those early days of M Division and great cars like the 1 Series M and previous M2. We got a straight 6 engine, we know hybrid assistance, we got the option of this manual gearbox, rear wheel drive. It does have a personality of its own, a more perky, sort of playful character than an M2.
So I'm a big fan of the new M2, but you can certainly find fault with it, starting with its £65,000 price tag. But when I griped about that to the man from BMW, he told me that UK buyers do get a generous standard kit list. Among it, the carbon fibre roof, a Harman Kardon stereo, and better sport seats. So that 15k increase over the last model isn't quite as bad as it first seems. But then it also looks like Lego tried to make a kit of the old car and got it a bit wrong. A 1700 kilo curb weight is as perplexing as it is disappointing. The engine could be more responsive below 3000 RPM, and the grown-up feel means it's lost some of the raw appeal of its predecessor. But the fact is, I really enjoyed driving the M2. I love how stable it is at speed, how it still manages to switch direction like a featherweight boxer, how it grips hard at the front and lets you dig into the rear drive bias, and how unflappable its damping is when you toss it around. It's like a smaller M3 with a more chuckable character. Then when you're not throwing the M2 about, it's surprisingly refined, with a cushy ride and precious little wind or road noise, and the easy surge of that big-chested 6 whooshing you along. The auto gearbox really complements that stretch too. So the new M2 is not perfect, but in an era when everything is changing, It feels like a more grown-up version of a reassuringly familiar formula. An evolution at a time of radical reinvention. And good as that auto is, I'll take my M2 with the manual gearbox, please.